Welcome everyone to today's webinar and thank you for joining us. We know your time is precious and we appreciate you spending it with us. Today we are presenting EMU Compare. This will be presented by Hayden Faltine and Michael Gliana. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToMeeting control panel. You'll see it there on the right-hand side and I will raise them at the end of the session for discussion. Please also put yourself on mute during the presentation. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Hayden Faltine.
Thank you, Kerry, and good morning and good afternoon to all of you who are joining us for this webinar session, a session which we're going to dedicate today to some further enhancements of the EMU platform related to the compare function, a function which is about to be launched. So this is a bit of a sneak peek into the work that the team have been busy working on for the last number of months as we lead up to the launch of EMU 4.3 on September the 30. And the compare function is one of a number of functions which we are exploring through a series of webinars. And today what I'd like to introduce is Michael Gliana, our CTO, and the gentleman who leads the development team behind the creation of these fantastic use cases that many of our service provider customers are using on the EMU platform to better improve the way in which they interact with their BroadWorks platform. For those who haven't joined us in the past, EMU is our platform that we use to manage large quantities of subscriber information on the BroadWorks platforms. We are implementing use cases that have never been able to be performed before. We're performing very sophisticated data extraction, manipulation and update functions across all of the elements within the BroadWorks platform to uncover and create and expose opportunities for service providers to capitalise on the wealth of knowledge and information that's stored within a BroadWorks platform as it relates to subscriber information. But in doing so, we've seen our customers for a long time faced with many significant difficult problems, and that is the fact that this is such a complicated environment and there are literally hundreds of configuration settings per user and there are thousands of configuration settings per group. And to be able to understand what is going on inside the BroadWorks platform is very problematic. To do that in large scale is difficult because the ComPilot interface, which is the one that's given to us by BroadWorks, is somewhat cumbersome, not a very nice interface to navigate, and often dangerous in the way in which you can easily change configuration without knowing. Our hope is with the EMU platform to help those troubled product managers, engineering people, operations people and help desk people gain better insights and knowledge into the way in which their platform's configured, do that en masse and give them the information that they need. Ultimately, we hope to save tens if not hundreds of hours of man/person hours in a given year by shortening the time it takes them to isolate deltas, isolate differences across large volumes of data across the BroadWorks platform. And by instantly being able to see what has changed, what are those deltas, then we hope to think that that empowers those people as help desk operators, as engineering staff who are managing a platform, or even product managers who are trying to gather insights into the way in which they need to position the product, to improve the product, to promote the product. And today what we wanted to do is just expose just three very simple use cases over the next 20 minutes or so that are typical of the types of use cases that different people inside a service provider environment would use to manage better the understanding of what's changing in their network over a time period. And so today what I'd like to do is to have Michael take us through these just three, there are many more, but just three today, those three use cases that allow different people inside a service provider to understand what's going on from a comparison perspective. So in a single view, we've got three different use cases here, and that might be how a particular user configuration has changed. Their settings have changed, someone has changed their settings, they've changed their settings, their service is not working, and they have unable to get the insights to know why. And how does EMU Compare help us within a few moments as opposed to many minutes? We also want to be able to give people who create the platform the opportunity to compare the way in which customers have commissioned something like a hunt group and how that now compares with the way in which it was originally configured, the original provisioning activity, maybe as a template. so that the people inside the service provider environment can understand, well, what do we know of our working hunt group, and how do we compare the customer's hunt group with what we know to be a working template of our hunt group, the way we've defined our product. We're going to use EMU Compare to show you that. The third thing we'll quickly show you is how maybe EMU Compare can be used by product managers to be able to gather insights around product adoption, product consumption and trending of the product features as they may launch new capabilities into the marketplace. And to be frankly honest, there is no way in which product managers can very easily gain insights to understand whether their campaigns are successful or not. They just literally fly blind after they've launched a platform feature and function into the marketplace, hoping and trusting that the adoption rates are heading in the right direction and that customers are consuming more and more of their precious hosted UC platform. So what I might quickly do is hand over to Michael Gliana, and he'll take us through these three scenarios and show you in practice how we are saving many, many hours of time, effort, and zeroing in on the key aspects of the platform within a few button presses, as opposed to many difficult long minutes and identify issues and opportunities in the platform. So over to you, Michael, to take us through some of these use cases. Off mute for us.
So I've switched screens to my EMU screen, and also I have another tab to access Copilot. Here. Let me first log into Copilot to show you the example group that we're going to work with today. The group called Adelaide. And we have a number of users in this group. We've got 4. Let's go back to EMU and select the compare function. For those of you who were present at the previous webinars, we went through the other function, including the audit, which we're going to use today to take a quick snapshot of one of the users in that group and use that snapshot for comparison. So let's go and select one of the users. For example, let's select Linus. I can go to the audit function, select all users in the system, search for the users who I want to take a snapshot of, and do a quick audit. Finished. Took 2 seconds. Download the audit. Let me go and have a look at the snapshot that we've just taken. It's a spreadsheet with the user settings in it and the values. If I scroll down, just in 2 seconds, we've captured about 600 settings for that user. So let's assume that someone went and changed the settings for Linux in a way where it's hard to figure out, and they've changed something that impacted the service. Let's try to go and simulate that on Copilot. If I go to the user, let's change a couple of settings. Let's in incoming call, for example, we'll turn the mobility SIM-ring to off. That means the user won't be able to get SIM-rings on their mobile, for example, or a secondary device. Let's go to calling plans and play with the outgoing calling plans. Change something that's hidden or obscure, like international calling from yes to no. And go to voice messaging and change something, for example, changing from unified messaging to forward voice messages to an email. This means that the user won't get voice messages on the platform. So we've changed 3 settings in different places, and let's imagine I'm a help desk staff and I've received a fault call from Linux because her service is not working properly. I can quickly go to the compare function select all the users, and go to Linux. And then compare that against the snapshot that we've just taken for Linux. Change a few things here, yeah. So EMU is going to go through every menu and menu item and every menu item settings and compare that against the snapshot. So it's finished and took about 10 seconds to do that. And it gives me an output file. Again, it's a spreadsheet format. Let me go and enlarge that. You can see it. I can see here that EMU quickly told me that the SIM ring was changed, went from true to false, and the voice messaging changed from unified messaging to deliver to emails. So very quickly, and also the outgoing calling plan, international calling was changed from allowed to disallow. EMU also color codes the changes. Anything in yellow means that it was a change. Anything in green means that it was added. And that's just a hashing of the password that was added. So as you can see that this use case really helped people in help desk and operations to quickly identify a change or a root cause of a problem. And the nice thing about the spreadsheet is that it's the same snapshot that I can use for comparison. I can also open and look at because it's human readable. And if I want to, I can feed that snapshot back to the system and get the system to get EMU to restore the service exactly the way it was when I took the snapshot. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I go to restore, I go to the users and search for Linux. And upload my snapshot, do a restore. So it's going through every menu and menu items and menu item settings, and it's finished. And if I go and refresh my Copilot, I see that my SIM ring is back to on. I go to the calling plans, outgoing calling plans, and EMU changed the international calling back to yes or allow. And if I go to messaging, voice management, EMU also restored the voice messaging settings to use unified messaging. So a single file was used for many purposes here. Firstly, to audit the service and give a nicely formatted output to a user to read about the different settings for the user. Secondly, to use it as an input to comparison and against the live system and to tell us about all the changes that were made to that service or the user, or that could be multiple users or the whole group or the whole enterprise, and if you like the whole system or any combination of these. And also it serves as a backup. So if I want to quickly change the user settings to the settings in the snapshot, I feed the snapshot to the restore function to do that. Back to you, Hayden.
Thanks, Mike. So what we're seeing from this particular function is an opportunity for service providers to significantly reduce the amount of time it takes in these help desk environments to isolate customer faults. And the best news is that we want to be able to reduce the average hold time in a help desk environment for a typical hosted UC problem from around about the 25-minute mark, which is our analysis of how long certain average faults take to fix, down to 3 or 4 minutes in being able to identify and restore a customer complaint. And so that has a significant impact obviously on the cost of operating the customer help desk environment, but equally on the perception of the customer themselves about how professional and how learned and educated and knowledgeable the operator is about the customer's environment. And we have anecdotes of people spending many, many minutes literally taking screen snapshots of Compilot, seeing conflicts with billing systems and not understanding what is the truth, and getting confused about the way in which a service should be being configured, and then asking the customer for information the customer would just never know or have. And so what this does is take all the conversation out. So instead of asking 20 questions, we might only ask 2 or 3 questions to get to the point, to get to the issue, and to be able to restore the issue. So significant time, dollar cost savings inside the business, but equally massive customer satisfaction results through really rapid response times and fixes to their issues. So that's the EMU Compare function for user configurations based on taking snapshots of customer configurations over time. And think about it as a bit like a time machine. We can go back in time and take a snapshot from a day or two or a week ago or a month ago that gives us a sense of what's happened to the customer's configuration over time. The next use case I'd like Mike to introduce is the one around a virtual group user service, like a hunt group, and being able to compare it not against the customer's configuration, but against what the service provider knows to be a known working configuration of a hunt group, and comparing that scenario in that case there too. So over to you, Mike, to show us how that works.
Thank you. Just to add to what you said, Hayden, about, you know, without something like the compare function, the only other option available at the moment for a help desk staff is to go to Compilot, go to every menu on the left-hand side and every menu item, and try to figure out, look at all the settings and try to figure out what's changed or guess what's changed, because there's no way to look at the historical data here in Compilot. So, and then try to play with these settings, and that will take minutes and probably hours, even for those who, of us who know the platform really well and spend many years learning it. It still takes a long time to be able to go through all the menus and menu settings and try to guess what the user might have changed that caused that problem. With something like EMU Compare, this takes seconds and minutes, and you can pinpoint the exact change and the root cause for a problem. So let's show you the second use case, of which we're going to use a template. And in this use case, we're not going to compare a user with a snapshot of the user, or a virtual user with a snapshot of the same virtual user, but we're going to use a generic template that will allow us to compare that template with all the users or all the virtual users in the system, or in a single enterprise or a single group. And that's very handy, for example, if we have some sort of standard templates that we would like to apply to all the services in the system, and we would like to see what customers and users are compliant and non-compliant with that template. So let's go ahead and show you an example of the template that we have prepared earlier. I drag my okay, so it's open on my other screen. That's fine. I'll just drag it to the screen. We have a template for a virtual user, which is a hunt group. And I have a number of settings in here that I would like to compare against every other hunt group in the system. As you can see, the advantage of using a template, firstly, that it can be compared against other identities and other hunter groups. And the second advantage is that you can only compare a subset of data, the things that you care about. And then anything that I don't want the EMU to compare, I can ignore with by typing a special keyword against that value, like that. So let's go ahead and use this template to compare the settings with every hunt group in the system. So I go to Compare and select my scope as virtual users and select all virtual users, and I can, for example, limit the comparison just to the profile page of the hunter group. So I go and upload my template and do the comparison. And as you can see, that's comparing it with the different hunt groups. It found 18 hunt groups and it took 2 seconds to do the comparison. I download that, open it up. Let me make this bigger so you can see it. As you can see here, the compare function compared against these hunter groups, one hunt group per column, and gives me the differences from the template. So obviously the user ID and the group ID will be different. It gives me settings like all these settings when, for example, the Adelaide hunt group used the allow members to control group busy, went from false to true. Anything in yellow means it's a delta. Anything in green means it was added, it's not in the template, was added by this hunt group. And anything in red means that it was removed from the service. It's in the template, but not in the hunt group. So you can quickly scroll across and have a look at all the hunt groups on the system and see their differences from the template very quickly and on a single spreadsheet. And this is not just limited to virtual services. And virtual services, we mean hunt groups, auto attendant, call centers, could be any of the group virtual services. But also you can use it for users. You can compare the whole user against a template. You can compare other, a user's menu, if you like, or the incoming calls of a user against a template, or a specific feature against a template of that feature. Back to you.
Thanks, Mike. So in effect, what we're doing here is moving the value of the EMU Compare function into the environment, into the service provider environment for more stakeholders to be able to benefit. And this particular function here of comparing a customer's environment with what in effect is the product definition, the standard way in which the product is deployed through a template, is a way in which engineering staff can start to understand maybe how the customer's configuration is deployed. And that's because often some of the faults and issues are escalated through to level 2 and level 3 into engineering teams, and EMU is just as powerful a product in the comparison side for them to be able to compare, well, how is our network supposed to be configured, and compare that against the customer's current configuration. So very powerful. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for taking us through that. The last thing I wanted to do over the next 2 minutes was just introduce the concept of analytics, the concept of being able to understand what is changing over time. And usually people that are interested in that are people like product managers, people that are launching new services to market, wanting to understand what the customer's acceptance and adoption and take-up rate of those particular new features are. And in this particular instance, I've asked Michael to build a little scenario that talks about the BroadSource mobility setting feature, which may be being launched post platform launch. Maybe a year down the track, the product manager has decided to include mobility as a feature, a campaign is initiated, and the big problem that all product managers have today is they're unable to gather the intelligence, the statistics and the analytics to understand how that campaign is actually performing. So now we have the compare function, we can see what's changing every day, changing every week, changing every month, and we can start to gather these statistics, move them to an environment where we can start to analyze this from a data analytics perspective. So Mike, if you could please show us how to gather the information, and we'll see what we can do with it.
Sure. Let's go back to the compare function. So in the previous two use cases, in the first use case, we showed a scope where all users' features and settings were compared to a previous snapshot of the same user. In the second use case, we showed a template that was compared against all the virtual users on the system. And in this use case, the last one, I'm going to change the scope a little bit and show you how a single feature could be compared against instances of that feature in an enterprise or a customer base. So let's go. I prepared a snapshot of the BroadSource mobility feature before, and here we have a snapshot that's for all the users in the system, and I have a snapshot of the BroadSource mobility feature for a single enterprise. Let's go ahead and do all users in the system. Before we do that, let's pretend to be users, and we've launched the BroadSource mobility, and we come here and we change the settings for the users in this group. So for example, I can go to Linux and call control BroadSource mobility, and just go to her settings. She's got both devices to be run when someone calls her BroadSource mobility number. Let's change that to only ring the mobile devices. Let's go to another user like Misha and change his BroadSource mobility settings to do something like use mobility calling line ID instead of fixed calling line ID. Let's go to another user like Vicky and go to her BroadSource mobility and change her CLID from using mobility to not use mobility. So there's a number of settings here that are very interesting for a product manager to know about. Something is who's using their mobile CLID, so they can understand the whole notion of using business versus persona management. If they're showing the mobile calling line ID, means that they're using their personal persona. If they're using the fixed line ID, means they're using the business persona. So that setting is very important. It gives the product manager a lot of information about how the users are interacting with the service and how they're using it, and whether this notion about the different personas at different times is actually something that the users want and use. And they also can use that information to decide on the default configuration of that service. Maybe after the launch, they're going to run a campaign to set everyone up in a way where most of the users are using those settings and they work out of the box. Let's go ahead and do the comparison. So the comparison scope is all users, and then here we're drilling down to a specific feature. We go call control, BroadSource mobility. So what I'm telling EMU now is that, I have my snapshot, but I only want the BroadSource mobility feature to be compared from that snapshot. Go to the comparison. That's finished. Download that file. Up. As you can see here, we have all the users in the system. Some of them those users didn't make any changes to the BroadSource mobility, so we scroll across, and eventually we'll come to those users who have changed their BroadSource mobility feature, and EMU nicely highlight that in yellow for us, so we know that Linus changed her active, and she went from both devices to be ranked to only mobile device to be ranked. And we keep scrolling across. We see another user, Misha, that we've changed, and he changed his deny call origination, and he's using his mobility CLID now instead of the fixed CLID. And then we keep going, and this is the last user that we've changed, Rowan, and his service went from active to inactive, and so on and so forth. And then Vicky, we changed Vicky to, and we changed her mobile calling line identity. So very quickly we determined the users that are interacting with that feature and changing it, and how they're changing it. And we can run multiple, if we take multiple snapshots, we can run that a number of times and collate the data, and then use that information to create graphs and information and analytics about, the user interaction. Very simple things like we can do, for example, we can use, since the output is in Excel, we can use powerful Excel functions to do accounting for us. So I can say, for example, B1 to CG1, count how many users and how many changes. So I know that there has been 2 changes to change the feature to on and off. There has been 1 change to change which device to ring. We had 1 change about call origination, and we had 2 changes for the CLID. So very quickly I can use Excel, and if I have this information over a period of time and I have lots of data, and let's do that. Let's drag and pretend that, simulate the data to pretend that we had some data we've captured over time like that. We've got, some instances, but it's very easy for us to go and grab that to show trends. So I can go and insert a pipeline or a line, like that, and drag it down, and that will show me the trend. It says that people are interacting with the more people are interacting, for example, with the on and off of that feature. Less people are interacting. People started, using the calling line ID, and then they didn't use it for a while, and then they started using it. So very quickly and very easily, I can use the information that I get from Compare to gather some analytics about the usage and the user interaction with the features. I think we also use the output of Compare to create these graphs that we pre-prepared. So back to you, Hayden, to tell us a little bit about the graphs.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So we think for the first time ever, there's a new person inside the service provider community who is going to be interested in consuming EMU as an analytical tool, and the compare function is one that is going to be key to them being able to get insights into creating, in effect, a dashboard that they've been unable to see in the years gone by. And these 2 particular graphs here just show us the impact and the decision making that a product manager can start to work through when he sees or she sees this data that's presented to them over a 31-day period post a launch of a particular campaign in the marketplace. Starts to give them a sense of how people are using it, gives them a sense of maybe how their advertising campaigns, their investment in online marketing impacts the adoption take-up rates of certain features and functions over time, and they can start to tune and tailor the way in which they address the marketplace to get the maximum benefit for the consumption of their network and the best use of their marketing dollar. So for us, this is the concept of EMU analytics and the ability to take the data that EMU creates and do very, very powerful things with it. So thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. We would like to finish up now, just after finishing the 3 use cases, and just re-summarise, if we may, that EMU Compare is a function that's been significantly enhanced over the last number of months, and today was a sneak peek to give you a sense of what's being launched in in EMU version 4.3 as it comes to market on September 30 of this year. And we hope to think that we can work with you to look at how EMU Compare as one of those functions on your platform can give insights and power to those that really do need to understand what's going on, what has changed, and what we need to identify as potential faults, issues, configuration changes in the network. So I hope that was a good investment in your time. I really appreciate that. And with that, what I might do is hand back to Kerry to help us facilitate an open mic Q&A session.
Thanks, Hayden and Michael, for that insightful demo. So as Hayden said, I've received a few questions, so I'll run through those now. If anybody else has any, just please pop them into the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen in the GoToMeeting control panel. The first question that came through, Michael, was if I take a snapshot of a whole group, can I just compare a single user later on?
Yes, you can. So let me go back to EMU so I can show you the different scopes that that can be controlled either on the UI or in the spreadsheet. So obviously the UI and the spreadsheet can have a different scope. One of them could, for example, the spreadsheet could have all the information about the group, but the UI restrict the comparison to a single user, or the other way around, where the spreadsheet would have information about the single user, and then the UI wants a comparison of the group. What the compare function does is that it shows any changes that's in one, not the other, as either addition or deletion. So the addition would be highlighted in green and deletion would be highlighted in red, but shows all the deltas in yellow. So you will still have the common data that you have in both the UIs and the spreadsheet, and if that the data is different, then it will be highlighted as yellow. So you can have different scope, it doesn't matter, and then the output of compare, it gives you an ability to figure out what's changed, what's added, what's deleted. But also EMU is configurable to tell it I only want the changes. I don't want the additions, I don't want the deletions, I don't want the changes, or I only want the additions, not the changes and deletions, or I only want to see what's being deleted but not added and changed. So it's very configurable and give you the ability to do all that.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, the next one is, can I schedule snapshots so that I get a time machine effect so that they can go back in time to do the compare?
The answer is yes. So the snapshot gets created with a timestamp, and that allows the snapshot to be automatically created by an EMU extension like a Kiwi or from a cron tab, and then sent to a network-based file system. And that way, because there's a timestamp in the file name, then the same file will not get overwritten by a previous snapshot. And then the snapshot could be stored in a network file system and made available to people, for example, in operations or in help desk, to be able to go back to a certain snapshot and then compare against that, or restore from a certain snapshot, or run a number of comparison and collate the data to create trends and graphs like what we've showed.
Thanks, Michael. The next lot of questions relate to the templating. So could you show us how to create a compare template and also how we switch between normal and template modes?
Okay. So the template is a standard snapshot. So I can go, for example, and change any snapshot to a template like that. So look, I can go to a certain user in the system, say Hayden, and take a snapshot of all incoming calls for Hayden and audit that. Finished, I download that snapshot, open it up. So basically this is my template, and the only thing that I need to do to make it a template is write the word template. Yes. That's it. That changes a standard snapshot to a template that allows the template to be compared against other users and virtual users, for example. It also give it the ability to go and change something. For example, if I don't want this to be compared, I go and say template against it, and that will allow me to ignore certain features. So I'm only comparing a subset of the information that I have in my audit. If I go and remove that, it changes back to a snapshot.
So Mike, we would go and store these templates away as representation of the way a service should be configured.
Yes. So when the people launch a service and they happy with it and they think that's their that should be the standard, the way that the feature needs to behave, then they can take a snapshot of it while it's on the system once they're happy with it, and then write template and make that a template of that feature. And then later on they can use that template to compare it against any other feature on the system to see whether it's compatible or not. And if they want to, they can remove the template keyword and use it as a standard snapshot and recover that feature and or change it back to the way that it should have been if there is a problem with the feature or the virtual service.
Okay,
so
thanks.
As we can see here, and you may start to appreciate that, the same output that we use, it's Excel, so it's very powerful. You can do lots of things with it, but also it's a human readable, and allows the user to read settings and change it. But also it serves as a multi-purpose file as well. It's the same output file, it's the same input file. With a single word, it changes behavior from becoming a snapshot and a backup to a template, and so on and so forth. So we try to use the same file, but do lots of things with it.
Thanks, Michael. The next question relates to the colours that we've seen on the screen. So we've seen red, yellow and green. Could you just describe what each colour means and also if they're configurable?
So the green means that things were added to the system and not in the snapshot. Red means that things in the snapshot but no longer exist on the system, so they were deleted. And yellow means that things were both in snapshot and on the system, but they've changed. And nothing or white means there's things on both and they haven't changed. And the colors are configurable in the EMU configuration file. You can configure the colors to anything you like, as well as the keywords for a template and the ignore as well.
Lovely. And the last question was, why are some of the cells empty?
Because they were, for example, if the cells empty means there is no difference between, let me scroll back. For example, this user didn't have that, means that this user had identical configuration to the snapshot. So there is no reason to show any delta because there are no deltas here. When there is a delta, the delta is shown, and if it's yellow again, it means a change. If it's a green or red, means it's an addition or deletion.
Thanks, Michael. It looks like we've covered all of our questions. Hayden, Michael, is there anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap up?
No, I was just going to ask whether anyone wanted to unmute themselves and ask any questions directly to the guys who are on the phone call with us. We can give you some moments to do that. If not, I'm done, and thank you so much. So I don't know whether, Kerry, they need to unmute themselves or whether you can unmute. Give people an opportunity to interject if they need to or put their hands up. love the opportunity to answer any more questions they might have.
Thanks, Hayden. Doesn't look like anybody wants to. They're able to unmute themselves though if they need to. All right, everyone, we appreciate you being here. If you do have any further questions that occur to you later on, please feel free to contact us via our website. We'll be more than happy to set up a time to go through it with you one-on-one. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you very much for joining, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.